Welcome, everybody. This is the September 20th, 2022 Corte Madera Town Council meeting. Hey, Charles, can you bang the gavel for me?
Okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead and call the meeting order. Rebecca, can you do a roll call, please?
Councilmember Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Mongan. Here. Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lee.
Here.
And Mayor Casissa.
Here. And if we can also stand and please salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open up our meeting to public comment. This gives anybody from the public an opportunity to speak on any topic or subject that is not on our agenda. You are limited to 3 minutes. If you're in person, please line up at the podium. And if you're zooming in, please raise your hand.
Fred, I do need maybe 10 seconds to get the meeting.
And then Rebecca, do we have anybody at the podium?
I'm just waiting to get the meeting, the blue sky timer into the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Which I'm almost done doing. We also have raised hands online too. So just a moment. Okay, the timer is in the meeting, so we can start public comment.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a line of 4 people at the podium so far.
Okay, if unfortunately I can't see, if you can line it for me and tee it off, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. And I'll start the timer whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm Dan Vigneron. I live at 125 Westward Drive in Corte Madera. For 25 years, my family and I'm a medical research professor, have loved living on Westward Drive, overlooking the Bay Marsh and the open space between us and Marin Country Day School. I'm here today to ask the council for help regarding excessive lighting since the 2019 expansion of MCDS that affects us neighbors and the sensitive habitats on the Triangle Marsh and the Ring Mountain. Beyond bright lights shining into our house, there's a broader issue. Environmental scientists are increasingly aware of the harmful impacts of light pollution has on people and the environment. The International Dark Sky Association states, quote, plants and animals depend on Earth's daily cycle of light and dark rhythms to govern life-sustaining behaviors such as reproduction, sleep, and protection from predators. Artificial light at night has negative, even deadly effects on many creatures. Glare from artificial lights can impact wetland habitats like the one we have that are home to amphibians such as frogs and toads, whose nighttime croaking is part of the breeding ritual. This nighttime croaking, perhaps coincidentally, has decreased since the bright lights are on, and in some places all night from MCDS. The artificial lights disrupt this nocturnal activity, interfering with reproduction and reducing populations. Following the Marin Country Day expansion work in 2018 to 19, bright lights shined upwardly through sensitive habitats into our yard, deck, and kitchen, making these areas unusable for us. Also, campus lights are on all night, causing bright glow in that small valley across the street from the parking lot, which must affect wildlife. The mitigated negative declaration document from that time stated no substantial light, quote, no substantial light or glare would be created because all lighting would be shielded and downcast to avoid spillover and unnecessary lighting that might affect nearby residents. But that's not been the case. It has affected us, and it's affected the habitat too, and that's in conflict with the Corte Madera General Plan policy to retain sensitive habitat areas by only allowing land use that minimize lighting disturbances, quote unquote. More details and links to photos are in my wife's letter submitted earlier today. Efforts by us and town staff, including to resolve these issues, have been hindered by the complexity of regulating documents, limited enforcement mechanisms, and that effective zoning ordinances are not in place. And that's the main thing that we asked for help from you by consulting legal counsel about options, including adding a zoning ordinance, including lighting and updating the regulating documents, including conditions of use. Thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wonderful town.
Go ahead, John.
My name is John Lister, former Citizen of the Year, former Lions Club president, 30-year resident on the 300 block of Willow next to the railroad path that goes from Menke Park to the tunnel. We've enjoyed over the years having our dogs walking under voice control for 28 years, until 2 years ago when signs were posted, enforcement was begun, and it's been very bad for our community spirit. Our dogs are good. There's no bicycles coming through there except a few kids going to school because it doesn't go anywhere. The bicyclists seem to stay on the streets because they're going up the hill. And I would really like to have that small area reconsidered to be voice control rather than under the leash law that controls the rest of the town. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I'm Tracy Lauderman. I live on Montecito where we're actually having this problem. So I say everything John has said, except I just want to, it's really, the issue has started just with one man who constantly complains and calls the police, and it's become a huge issue. So because he's so concerned about the law, if we can just change the signage, it will stop him from constantly calling the police and to make it all easier for the rest of us. The only other thing I'd like to bring up is I would love to try to do a pilot program at our park at Town Park to have hours in the park where we can have our dogs off leash in a bigger area to exercise them. There's absolutely not one person in our park during the week from 7 in the morning till school gets out. There's not a soul to be really seen except for a couple of people. So I'm just hoping that we can take into consideration the dog park that was built is definitely not big enough to accommodate a lot of dogs, and a lot of dogs do not like to be fenced in areas with a bunch of other dogs. So I just really appreciate taking a look at that and maybe possibly letting us use our parks that are right down the street from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Kate Donahue. I live at 103 Stetson, and I'm also here with the same issues about the voice control, that we would like to have that on the Montecito path in addition to the to having the dogs on leashes. And if we could please change the dog control regulations. One of the problems we've been having is, in particular this last year, has been with the code enforcers, their officiousness and enthusiasm to enforce this leash ordinance in response to particular vexatious complaint man that Tracy mentioned earlier is very concerning. And this has become a quality of life issues for the residents of the Chapman Park area that use that path. And earlier this summer, we met with Mike Moriarty, and he said to us that that code enforcement cannot turn a blind eye. So rather than turning a blind eye, we'd like you to please expand the ordinance so that we could have voice control for this particular area. And I propose the creation of a pilot program where dogs can be on leash or under voice control on our path, and that this would help with code enforcers regarding this particular issue. Wouldn't it be necessary that they be called if the dogs are under our control in addition to the leashes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Hoffmeyer, and I'm here to support my friends on this matter. It's already been said really well tonight by all my friends here. I think what I want to state is that the problem is not the dogs, it's the people. So when you start putting all these parameters, you know, on areas where Diane, our friend here, is born and raised, she's between 60 and 90, so she's our classic legend here, and it's actually kind of frightening that she's in a way has been abused in this situation. So I'm here to support my friends, and also Tracy brought up a really good point with the park. I love the idea for the dog park, but it's way too small. I mean, it's a fraction of the size compared to Mill Valley or San Marin. And I think the issue there would be just letting people clean up after themselves, put more of the doggy bag dispensers down in the park. And let's find an area over near the pond, near the tennis courts. It doesn't have to be, the whole park, but I think we can all work together on that, because there is no grass in the dog park. And a lot of people actually think it's kind of a health concern with, winter coming in, possible giardia runoff type of situation. So thank you very much for working with us on all this. And also, I wanted to say thank you. I talked to Samantha regarding the trees with the new development at Town Hall, and she heard from you guys. So thanks again for the neighborhood in Willow working with us on that. And I'll be glad to pick out trees with my neighbors. So cheers.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. I don't see anybody else in person wishing to speak. So Rebecca, we have one hand raised, which is Patty. Can you bring her over, please? Thanks.
Yes. Patty, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So I'm representing age-friendly Corte Madera, and I don't know that everybody is aware of it, so I'll give you like the 3-minute history of age-friendly Corte Madera and bring you up to speed. We've decided that we should probably report to the town council quarterly, so that will be now. I have lived in Corte Madera since 1979, and I've led Age-Friendly Corte Madera since its founding in 2014. Once Age-Friendly was welcomed into the WHO network of age-friendly cities and communities, we used data from the survey that we provided to all Corte Maderans over 55 to develop our age-friendly strategic plan. That included the vision of an intergenerational center that launched in 2018 and due to the pandemic went virtual in March of 2020. The intergenerational center still offers many activities at no cost. Age-Friendly also honors all those 90 or better with a festive celebration each year and teams up with the Corte Madera Lions and with Rotary to assist older adults with small household tasks. In 2020, with Age-Friendly's Third Wednesday Talks on Hold, we joined other age-friendly towns in Marin to present helpful monthly forums on Zoom. During the COVID pandemic, we partnered with the town and the Lions Club to provide free mass in Town Park. Since we've been unable to hold any large community celebrations, Age-Friendly has taken our Corte Madera honors to the doorsteps of some of our most appreciative nonagenarians and centenarians. We are also currently collaborating with the town to generate a community walking map that will identify easy routes indicating benches, restrooms, and drinking fountains. And on Sunday, we honored 32 Corte Maderans 90 and better at their doors. Even though it was a rainy day, we made a lot of people happy. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Appreciate it. I don't see any other hands raised. And Rebecca, I believe you have some email comments to read.
Yes, I have 3 emailed public comments to read out loud. They are already uploaded onto the agenda in the Agenda Center online under correspondence under public comment, so that council and the public will have access to them. And I'm going to try and start the timer on one screen and read it on another screen.
Thanks.
This one is from Linda Meyer, who says, "Dear City Council, I have concerns about the condition and safety of some of the widely used paths and stairs between the roads on Christmas Tree Hill. The city of Corte Madera acknowledges that the maintenance of big stairways like Hill Path are their responsibility, but have been less clear and responsive to inquiries about whose responsibility it is to maintain these smaller yet heavily used paths. such as the path between Hill Path and Crescent, the path and steps above Ridge between Crescent and Morningside, and the spring trail between Summit and Summit. If these trails and paths are the town of Corte Madera's responsibility, we respectfully request that the city of Corte Madera determine a way to monitor their status and keep these paths and stairs maintained and safe. If they are not your responsibility, will you kindly identify whose responsibility they are and work with them on maintaining these paths and stairs? My neighbors and I would greatly appreciate an answer from a town council member or appropriate designee. I have called and written to Corte Madera for clarification and I've gotten it. It's complicated. We will get back to you without the promised follow-up. The path between Hill Path and Crescent is the only access to my 85 or so year old neighbor's home, as well as our home. I have tripped along this path in the areas that have long since been in pieces and find it ever more difficult to lug a full heavy green bin down to the road over the broken up cement. I really do not want to rehab from another fracture to be added to my upcoming retirement. As an example of the damage that can happen when these steps and paths are not maintained, on December 18th, 2021 evening, on a dry night, I fell while traversing the ridge steps, fracturing one wrist and severely injuring the other. After 6 months of physical therapy, I have regained most functionality, but no longer have full range of motion of my left, fortunately, non-dominant arm. This is a pathway I know well and traverse at least once or twice a day when walking my dog or visiting with friends. By the way, my dog was not implicated in my fall. There is no or inconsistent lighting on both of these trails. We appreciate having these paths and stairs available to us, and yet would like, as I'm sure you would, to have them predictably well maintained and safe. I appreciate your dedication to Corte Madera. Sincerely yours, Linda Meyer, resident on Hill Path. Let me open the next one. The next one is from Connor Granahan, who says, hello, town council. I live on Summit Drive on Christmas Tree Hill, which is right next to the Spring Trail Hill Path. There is a rail missing and many of the steps are dilapidated and in need of repair. My understanding is that the town is responsible for repairs. If not, please let me know. Can these be investigated and repaired by the town? Many thanks, Connor Granahan. And then the final email that I have to read is from Sherry Vigneron, whose husband alluded to the email and the photos, which are available on the town's website under the Agenda Center where this public comment was uploaded. Okay. Dear Corte Madera Town Council members, my husband and I appreciate all the efforts of the Town Council to incorporate dark sky and or bug ratings into ordinances and conditions of use to minimize light pollution. As you know, in addition to preserving the beautiful aesthetics of our town, this saves energy, increases resident comfort, and reduces the negative impact light pollution has on the environment, including interfering with animal activity and survival. Given the importance of minimizing the negative impacts of light pollution on neighbors and wildlife along Triangle Marsh and Ring Mountain, we are seeking your help with the excessive light pollution produced on the MCDS campus over recent years, including the use of non-compliant lighting fixtures. The MCDS lighting issues have not been a straightforward code enforcement case, and a significant amount of town staff time and our time has been invested in trying to resolve the recurring issues. We seek town council help to address the issues that are making enforcement of dark sky principles and fixtures difficult. As we understand the situation, there are 3 issues. 1, no zoning ordinance is in place and regulating documents lack specificity to mitigate environmental impacts of light pollution. MCDS does not fall under any zoning ordinances as there are none in place for the zone classification. We were told that the design review permit, conditional use permit, and conditions of approval are all still, quote, live documents for MCDS restrictions requirements. Excuse me, I'm going to pause the timer for a moment. Oh. I apologize, my asthma is acting up and I cough a lot when I talk lately. Okay. Whew. Is it going again? Dark sky compliant principles, including total lumens in use, hours of use, dimmers, motion detectors, etc., nor do they seem to have adequate teeth to motivate MCDS to comply with the document requirements. 2, new non-compliant light bollards were installed in the parking lot during the expansion project and not fixed once identified. Regulating documents are not being followed post-project completion. In February 2019, we initiated our first complaint about the unexpected excessive lighting. An email to us from town staff stated that the town approved the bollards, although they sent us the bollard specs that clearly stated that they are not dark sky certified or compliant. In retrospect, it would have been better for CM staff to work with MCDS to ensure that they fix the bollards during construction, including when electrical work on campus was still in process. It is clear that given the regulating documents, it is much harder to get compliance after a project is completed, and the bollards have been a recurring issue, including the cause for MCDS choosing to use temporary non-compliant floodlights in their parking lot last Thursday. 3, it appears that there are several other non-compliant light fixtures on MCDS property, including the parking lot and campus area. Effective dimmers and timers are not in use. Also, many lights are on all night, dark to dawn in the campus. Planning and code enforcement needs to review the entire site for compliance and develop standards to bring compliant lights in harmony with dark sky principles. Okay, there are still a couple paragraphs left and photos that are linked on the agenda that is posted on the website. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And that's the end of the email comments.
Yes, I am not seeing any additional raised hands, and I am not seeing any other attendees at the podium.
Thanks. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll go ahead and move to presentations. We have 2 presentations tonight. The first one is a proclamation, which I'm going to go ahead and read part of it. As mayor of the town of Corte Madera, I do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2022 to be Hispanic Heritage Month in the town of Corte Madera, and encourage all residents to celebrate the heritage and achievement of Hispanic Americans and recognize their contributions to our community and to our nation. And with that, we'll go ahead and move to the second presentation, which is on the community garden for the town of Corte Madera.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I'll just, if I may, Mr. Mayor and council members, just provide a brief introduction to this presentation. First, I just wanted to note, originally this item was scheduled to be on a council agenda by Todd back in May or approximately June of this year. But we had several really full agendas, and then we had several canceled meetings. And so it got pushed back, and that's why you're seeing it at this time rather than earlier in the year. And then secondly, just really to provide some context for this presentation. My understanding from speaking with Todd and others involved in this effort, I haven't been directly involved myself or don't have direct knowledge of sort of past history with the community garden effort. And I'm sure Wendy and Tanya will go into some of this in their presentation. But for a number of years now, there's been an effort by community members to find a suitable location for a garden. I think I understand that there's been cost and some other factors have presented challenges with some of the prior locations that have been identified. But more recently, after discussing with Todd and the Larkspur Corte Madera School District, attention has shifted to a rather small, underutilized portion of the Cove Park. And really this presentation is an opportunity to hear more about these current efforts. And so it's an informational presentation, and I'll turn it over to our presenters this evening to talk a little bit more about that. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Cue up the PowerPoint then. Well, as that's queuing up, I'm Wendy Doherty. I'm a member of a threesome Gleason back here for this presentation tonight for the Corte Madera Community Garden Proposal. Some of you may recognize me perhaps as your former Redwood High School student's chemistry teacher. And there's one person in this room who would recognize me as his chemistry teacher. And it makes me feel very old and a little bit sad, but nice to see you again, Eli. So yeah, Eli. Okay. So as you can see up on the screen, we have a trio of us here that are going through this presentation tonight, at least Tanya and I will. And about 2 years ago, I got the Pat Ravazio poke, and it may not have been an actual poke, but it's, hey, Wendy, we should do something about a community garden. And it was the middle of the pandemic. I was like, okay, sure. So we got together I can't remember exactly how, but we got together and we came up with the idea that we would have a presentation done on Zoom. And Pat got on social media and got everybody whipped into shape, and approximately 40 people that were interested in the garden participated. And one of those, I'm glad to say, was Tanya, who is a certified UC Master Gardener, and she joined this leadership team. So that's how she came into the program here. I don't know if Pat knew this when she poked me, but before I was a chemistry teacher, I was an agriculture teacher and have a graduate and undergraduate degrees from UC Davis and Ag. And I've managed 2 school farms that went anywhere from 10 to 40 acres, besides having some knowledge about agriculture in general. So I do remember in the past decade or so, I went to at least one meeting where there was a proposal for a community garden at the park. And 2 things are burned into my consciousness. And one of those is someone in the audience said, but apartment dwellers might use the garden. And I was like, duh, after I picked my jaw up off the ground, of course, we hoped that they would use the garden. And the second thing that stuck into my brain was, oh, community gardens. Gardens are just so messy. So what I would like to say is that it is entirely possible to have a garden that is both beautiful and functional. And if you want to do some visualization here, you might be entering one of the gardens in Corte Madera that's got a lovely grape arbor, or possibly roses growing on the arbor that welcome you in to a garden that is not messy, but is entirely beautiful and functional, and might look something like this very model garden that I had the good fortune to rent a vacation house right across the street from it in Carpinteria. So this is the Carpinteria Community Garden. Please note, it is not one bit messy. There's someone there who's as anal and retentive as I am and obsessive, and it's very tidy. And it's also super functional. And as you can see, it's incredibly attractive and also productive. They're in such a wonderful climate. These people are growing bananas there. So that's kind of the inspiration I hope that you can have pictured in your mind's eye, as to what we're looking for in our garden here in Corte Madera. Obviously, it promotes healthy lifestyles. There's lots of benefits to them. Most of this information I've gotten from UC Cooperative Extension and their advisors, and the network of community of master gardeners that have been trained there have been very helpful. So you get access to fresh fruit and vegetables. It mitigates food insecurity. When you're working in a garden, you're exercising and you're chit-chatting with the person in the garden bed next door, and overall will improve, or hopefully decrease, I should say, our carbon footprint for the town. So there's some lifestyle benefits there. Clearly, the environment will benefit. We have climate-friendly food production. It'll provide habitat for pollinators and other beneficial insects. Promote and utilize water and soil conservation techniques. And interestingly enough, a UC research project made confirm that when you take these underutilized lots and green them up, that it increases the property values of the homes around them. So as I mentioned, gardens provide environmental benefits, and this is a very simple example of how you can put up a little bee home. If you haven't seen the nature video called My Garden of 1,000 Bees, which was wonderful, you don't realize there's lots of different bees out there besides stinging honeybees, and these are mason bees, and it's a really easy project to pop one of these guys up in the corner of a garden. And in addition to that, this is a bat box, and a community garden is a great place of refuge for bats. And if you were at the Chico Farmers Market like I was last weekend, this thing cost $50 built. And yet, as I looked at it, my teacher hat went back on, and I realized this is an incredible project, because what you could have, since both of the sites that we've been considering for about the last year and a half, they're both near schools. And one of the sites is near the high school, the middle school, and an elementary school. And so a kid in the woodshop class could measure and cut pieces of wood, bring it over to the elementary school, have the little kids take hammers and nails and they put it together. And then the kicker, the secret agenda that this teacher has behind that, they'll walk over to their nearest community garden and help install that. And as a former manager of school farms, it reduces the problem with graffiti and vandalism if the kids in the neighborhood have like a buy-in to that. So it's educational as well as like secret agenda protecting the garden from vandalism. Community gardens are also a wonderful place for communities to connect with each other. So you can have gatherings and educational programs beyond that. For example, inviting in members of the retirement community or providing instruction to your own gardeners or having field trips. I know that Joe Stewart at Redwood High School, who got together his sustainable agriculture program about 8 or 10 years ago, he's got kids that are working on the school farm, but it's just a hip, skip, hop, and a jump from one of the proposed sites, or they could take a field trip to the other site. And they're the kind of thing where, like, if I had to go catch a pig out in a pasture, I'd take 10 sophomore boys, we drive to the farm, and I say, you boys go catch that pig. And they loved it. And so that's the kind of thing where you bring kids in with young able bodies to go to work on it. So it's that's that intergenerational partnership that you could have with schools again. And so besides educational, there could be experiential experiences that can happen in a garden. This image is taken from Flagstaff, and this is the community garden there that is run by the Navajo Nation. And that is a traditional adobe oven that they had put together using ancient techniques. And that little engaged little girl there is my now 3-year-old, but then 2-year-old granddaughter who's learning how to grind corn. And it's just a hands-on kind of fun thing, and anyone can walk by at any time and jump in and participate. So very experiential. We're back here to the community garden at Carpinteria. Signs like this are posted all around the garden, especially in proximity to the surrounding edge pathway where people from the outside can see the signs. And seasonally, as it makes sense, they change the sign with various important bits of information on it. This is an example that comes from the Navajo garden, and they actually have demonstrations of how they irrigated for thousands of years in this desert environment. So this is a sustainable and a traditional practice that's actually in practice and that people can learn from. And gardens can be models for sustainable practices. Back to Carpinteria, they have just a model of a rainwater catchment system with a cistern there. And on the roof, you can see the solar panels that power their little shed. And those of you that are old like me and are California natives, you might recognize that color. That is the traditional color that all of the train stations in California have been painted with, at least since as long as I can remember. And they're right next to the Amtrak station and right next to the railroad track. So they have that kind of attention to detail and obsessiveness, I think, that can take a garden and put it into a beautiful mindset instead of, oh, they're always messy or whatever. The community gardens are natural meeting up places. This is the one back at the Carpinteria site made with recycled materials and renewable materials, but it's not just necessarily a site for the gardeners to meet. This could be a community center. You could have wine and cheese tasting fundraisers here, besides inviting people in to have educational sessions. And in addition to that, you could envision yourself walking through the entrance to the garden, and instead of a little lending library full of books, it'd be full of seed packets. Or maybe there's a table right next to this that has produce that the gardeners are wanting to share, excess produce. So what we're coming to here then is the understanding that gardens can also be very inclusive and accessible. This is back at the one in Flagstaff. And if you look carefully, that is a sort of a raised bed that a person in a wheelchair can manage their garden. And it's very beautiful. I don't have time to show you, but a lot of these gardens are just filled with art too. Another field trip from a local school. Like when Liz Lauder was the art teacher over at Redwood, she put mosaic tile on everything. But it'd be kind of fun to have the art kids come over and do some fun things like make stepping stones out of chips of mosaic. You have to process your food in a garden. So instead of going inside, washing it with water and having it go down the sink into your sewer system or septic system, the water from this processing station in the Carpinteria site goes right into watering the garden again. So beautiful and functional. And gardens have to have fences. There's no doubt about it. You have to have a fence around your garden. There are 4-footed varmints that go into gardens that we want to keep out, and there are 2-footed ones. And the 2-footed ones, excuse me, they're the ones that we want to welcome and yet make them feel part of the whole process, but not go in and trash the place. So at the Carpinteria site around the garden, and that fence is very similar on the vinyl clad chain link there is something we've been talking about for design. They've planted a lot of edibles. So there's like avocados and bananas hanging over from the trees, and on the ground are strawberries. And they encourage the community to walk by, reach down if the strawberries ripe, it's outside the fence, pick it, it's yours. So I think that's a way that you can keep a garden secure and also be welcoming to the community. These are all things that we should consider. So I hope in my short time here that I've given you a window into the vision that we've had collectively for the past couple of years. What is that vision for the Corte Madera community gardens that we're proposing? We're hoping that you would see them as something that you see here. Absolutely beautiful, not messy, highly functional and inclusive, as well as inviting in the community to use it with more than their eyes. So on that note, I am going to turn over the presentation to Tanya, who will present some preliminary plans for potential garden sites. In our short time of looking at this, we've identified 2 potential sites in the town, and she will talk about that now. Thank you.
You have the slide then.
You get to push
Oh,
the button.
goodness.
I push the button.
Hi, I'm Tanya Conker. I live on the east side, not too far from where the Cove School is. And what Wendy talked about was potentially doing 2 gardens. I mean, Corte Madera is a very large town and we could benefit from 2, but maybe doing it in stages where we start with the Cove Garden and we do this in 2 phases. And if you look at the map, the corner that's triangled would be the first phase. And it would have a beautiful open gate that you would come into, you could see from the park, and a gathering space. We talked about in Wendy's presentation about community gardens being a place to gather and to learn and you get to know your community. And that very first, I don't know. I can't do that. All right. Oh, okay. So this area, you would come into the gate here. It would be a harder surface of decomposed granite or something. And it would be a great gathering area for the community. We have an arbor that's shaded. Now, I want to just point out that the garden I'm talking about is just this corner. This would be phase 2. So we're just talking about this area. This is really not going to be part of the first build out, but you'd have an ADA area, sitting area, an arbor for teaching and having classes, bringing the kids over from the school and the teachers being able to teach outside, lecturers to come in, hands-on workshops would be in this area. So 4 ADA beds, a shed, a bulletin board that would have community announcements, the garden rules, a lecture list of what's going to be happening would be here. And then 32 raised beds that would be then rented out for tenants to come, benches, seating areas, a shed here to store tools and resources for planting, and a compost area. So this would be phase 1. And if we're allowed to take over the basketball court that is currently there, we would move into this area. This side would be phase 2, and it would have 61 beds in it, which really expands what we can do for the community. Sheds for storing, another compost. The whole fence area is going to be planted with pollinators and berries so that people can come along, like Wendy said, pick some berries, pick some fruit, and it be just absolutely beautiful. A second gate here with access from this side, and a fence in area, well, the whole thing's fenced in, but an area here that would be hardscape for mixing soil and bringing in amenities that we need to add throughout the year. I know there was some concern about the NRG trailer there, emergency trailer, and I am talking to Lee and John Howard, who started the NRG, tomorrow, I think. And we're going to talk about how we might be able to implement a place for that to stay close by. So we're going to talk to them. This additional side will have 61 beds, compost area, completely fenced in, 7-foot fence to keep the 4-legged critters out. And as Wendy referred to, the 2-legged critters are sometimes a problem. We'll also have some security cameras. Any questions? Did we not do that? We don't do questions. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
Keep going, you're on a roll.
No, that's.
Yeah, so I'll do this really quick. The additional site, it's hard to see, is the Coulee site, which is off of Tamil Vista. This is a 550-foot run. Beautiful. It could be a beautiful garden. It has a main gate here. You come into a community area and meander through the different flower beds or the different planting areas. We would also do a fence and pollinators around this area and on the back, and a hardscape area here for planting. This would have 62 5x10 beds in it. So a few larger beds, 6 ADA. Now we're guessing the amount of ADA beds we'll need. It depends on what the rules are. Composting area, sheds, and watering faucets. We're hoping, well, we're not hoping. The watering will be done by hand so that it encourages the tenants to come in, work in their gardens, water their gardens to keep them going. We're going to have a beautiful hanging basket out here and a signage so that it looks really nice from the street. So this would be the Coulee site, and the other one up here is the Cove site. These are 2 proposed sites. We also would be getting funding from fundraising, grants, and potentially Measure A, which we've just learned about today. And hoping that the Corte Madera Community Foundation will be our fiscal agent for our 501(c)(3).
So I just wanted to update you. We're really hoping to get some consensus that this is something you would like to explore further. Our next step would be to get working drawings and work with more of the community to make sure that we're on target with our plans. But today there was a meeting by the Marin County Parks Government and External Affairs Manager, Kevin Wright, where they were announcing that for Measure A funds, they now have $960,000 a year to put into community gardens. And we were the only ones on the call that actually had gardens like in the planning stage and going. Some other people are looking for support for their existing gardens. But Kevin Wright said it was possible that the county could even develop a comprehensive program to help communities develop community gardens, from all the way from planning to running them, and even providing possibly annual monies to help find coordinators and things, which is often the problem, to find the labor kind of to make the gardens work. So anyway, there's a lot of good possibilities, and I hope you will support this so we can keep going. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks. And thanks for the presentation. Great job, Wendy, and also Pat. What we're going to do before we bring it back to council, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. So if anybody from the public, either in person, on Zoom, or via email, if you wish to comment on this presentation, please let us know. And then Rebecca, do you see anybody in person? I don't see any hands raised.
I am not seeing any raised hands online. We don't have anyone standing at the podium at the moment, but let me just check the public comment email quickly and see if we got any emailed public comment.
And we do have one hand raised.
Oh, there goes a hand.
Yeah, Karen.
Okay, Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, I just have a couple of questions. I was wondering if there had been any kind of budget put together. I don't know if it's a little too preliminarily to do that. I didn't get a clear idea as to where the garden on the Cove side, on the east side, was located. I can kind of tell on the other one because there's a street mentioned. And then on the one on the Cove side, I see that there's homes adjacent to it. So I didn't know if there'd been any outreach to those prospective neighbors. That obviously would be something, if I was adjacent to a proposed community garden, I'd want to hear about it before it showed up more than a general proposal. And then the last thing is that I've oftentimes walked near the Larkspur Community Garden, and I've never seen more than 3 or 4 people there. I'm there on a Saturday, which seems like it would be a popular time. So I don't know if this kind of ad hoc community has gone over and visited the Larkspur Community Garden and to see, you know, how that works. If there's anybody over there that's kind of the organizing person for that community garden that might be able to give them feedback, guidance, and issues that they've encountered and how to move forward for the maximum success. So those are my comments, questions, yeah buts, and what abouts. Thank you.
Well, after I close public comment, I'll see if some of your questions can get answered.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rebecca, any email comments in? I don't see any more hands raised.
We did not receive any emailed public comments.
Okay, thanks. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment. I'll see if we can get those questions answered from Karen, and then I'll bring it to the council for questions. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any money's been budgeted, correct?
No.
Thank you. And then Wendy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, not from the town. No, my understanding in talking to Tanya and Pat was that there was going to be some fundraising efforts being done on their behalf, but we're a ways away from even considering this as part of a budgeting item.
Okay, thanks. And then Wendy, can you answer a few of the other questions that Karen had? Thanks, I appreciate it.
I never needed a mic side of the pool, yelling at the water polo girls and the Ravasio kids swimming. So in regards to the question that was about, shoot. Can you refresh me on the first item that she mentioned? Budget. So we were hoping that we can't really answer that at this point in time. Okay, if it's a budget question, I'm going to turn it over to Pat. That would be one. And the other question was about. Yes, and so Tanya has spoken to, can I see that person's name here? I don't remember names.
To Michelle and Brett.
And-
Michelle is the principal,
Okay, the principal at Cove School
and Brett, the superintendent of Larkspur.
and the superintendent of the Larkspur schools. They're very enthusiastic about it. And so I'm not sure that I have not made any, and I don't know that you've made any outreach yet to any of the community members around the Cove School, but we do have verbal support from the superintendent and the principal. They really want to have they like the teaching aspect of the community garden and would like to incorporate that in their curriculum. That's basically what we've heard from them. And there was one other question though that I thought that I could answer pretty quickly.
I think one was, have you talked to any of the
Oh,
neighbors?
the Larkspur
that-
Garden. Yeah, so the Larkspur Garden is administered by someone in the city of Larkspur. I don't remember the name exactly, but that person is in charge of, collecting the fees and that sort of thing. But the garden itself is, I've gone by it myself. I've always felt like it was kind of more locked down than most community gardens that I've seen. And that part of it did not appeal to me personally. But also, I think that it could have been planned better, but that's me. But I can see that people being very active in these gardens because of their proximity to neighborhoods and to the school. That would be having, for example, the western site that was potentially proposed. It's near where people apartment dwellers. They live in apartments. I could see them using that. And then also in the Cove site, the interactions with the school.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. And on the budget, Adam's already handled the budget question, so we're good on that one.
I think the commenter had also asked if you could explain where on the Cove site the garden is.
Tanya,
Oh, yeah, so.
just go get him. Good, you want the pointer? You touch.
I don't do this well. So this is the very back of the school. And
You know what, I'm sorry,
Community Park.
I'm sorry, unfortunately, we're not seeing you, we're just seeing the podium.
Oh,
Just to let you know.
okay, well, here. I'll hold it. We'll show you.
Thanks, that works.
The school is here.
Okay,
The park, the San Clemente Park is here. There's a barbecue and an arbor here. So does that make sense? So it's in the very, very back corner.
yeah, and there's a sand volleyball court there also, correct?
It's out front here. This is not old, it is the existing basketball court.
Okay,
That, the very old one that's kind of run down.
so it wouldn't interfere with the sand volleyball?
No, not at
Okay.
all.
Okay,
It would only interfere with the older basketball court. That's why it would be phase 2, because we don't know that we'll have access to it until the school lets us know.
okay, so one quick question, if you can. There's homes that abut, I'll say where the basketball court is. Can you just point to where that would be on that map or on that?
There are 3 homes here
Okay,
and 1 here.
okay, all right, thanks. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
put it in perspective.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's a different perspective when you're on Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely, it is.
Thank you. And Rebecca, any email comments?
We did not receive any emailed public comments.
Okay, thanks. With that, we'll bring it back to council. This is an informational presentation. We're looking for questions only and not comments. So does any council member have any questions? And if you do, please raise your hand. I feel like I'm in the third deck of a baseball game, looking down. Any questions? Yeah, Leela, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks to the 3 of you for your work on this. It's great to see the community come out and, be enthusiastic about something that would be a benefit to the community. I just had a couple of quick questions. One, does anybody know on the Parks and Rec survey, was this an item? We've talked about, the commenter asked about community buy-in, and that would be a great way to know like what the level of support would be for something like this.
But it wasn't one of the top box things. It wasn't really questioned.
Okay.
It did come up. It wasn't one of the hot topics. I'm translating.
And proof of demand is that there's a wait list constantly for the Larkspur site of 50 to 60 people every year.
It's a 2-year waiting period to get into the Larkspur one. So if you want a spot, you got to bump somebody off or stick your foot out as they leave the garden.
That's one of my other questions. So if, for example, where you had 32 beds to start, does each community member get a whole bed? So does that allow 30 community members to participate or?
Yeah, 30 community members that sign up to lease or rent the beds.
Okay.
So they would have access to those. They don't have to share them.
And they would
if you
have
want
them
to.
indefinitely, like thinking about a wait list, you can just sort of, like, suppose you're not even using your spot, right? Can you kind of sit on it and prevent other people from getting in off the wait list?
Well, I don't know that might be something we would have to address in garden by, the bylaws and the guidelines.
Okay.
We didn't have time to show it in the presentation, but there's this much resource that comes from UC Cooperative Extension. And they have templates of multiple different kinds of garden contracts and who's doing responsibilities. And so all of that is kind of laid out for us, and we just have to pick the system that'll work for us. But most gardens would have like a governing committee and then rules that people have to abide by. And if you had written that into your rules and someone is not abiding by it, then that could open the door for another community member to take over and enact a bed.
Okay. And the Cove site, is that Larkspur Corte Madera School District property? They are the owners of that property?
I think it might
My
be under,
understanding that it's the school system, but also the town. Am I,
hey, Leela, it's my understanding we have a joint use agreement with the Larkspur School District. So we have to figure out that angle of it. If it's an allowable use, and just, again, we'd have to deal with the school district under that joint use agreement.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my last question is the watering point. I tried to have a garden in my backyard and it didn't have irrigation. And, you know, we have some really hot days here. And there were times where if I didn't go out, you know, 3 times a day, things shriveled up and died. And I just wonder if that's realistic to expect, you know, people to be attending to it like that. So it's just something, I don't know if you've thought about those contingencies.
Well,
it's pretty standard for community gardens to be hand watered because what we don't want to do is to have an irrigation system that people are not monitoring it because they think they're getting watered and then there's a leak or there's a problem. So for that reason, we're going to encourage hand watering. Yeah, it's tough when it gets hot. But does that answer your question or?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
And I guess I'd like to address that too from personal experience that if I'm out of town, I hire my granddaughter to water for me. And if you're in a bed next to someone else is in a bed and you say, Sally, I'm going to be gone for next week, I can cover for you when you go in December to go see your granddaughter if you can water my garden for a week. So I think what happens is you develop relationships within the garden community and then you get someone to help back you up. And that was it, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks. Alvita, any other questions? Thanks. Are there any other questions from council members? I do have one, because you mentioned hand watering before. Does that mean there has to be a water source on site? And if so, how does that, who pays for the water for on site? And then how does that bode with the water district, with us potentially being under drought restrictions?
So we're going to work with the school district and the city to have a meter put on that would be for the garden. And there is a water source that's fairly close by. So we would have a meter that would be, the water that we use would be metered and we would then pay for that.
Okay. All right, thanks. Any other questions from town council members? Okay, if not, then I'll go ahead and close this presentation out, or this part of it out. And
there's a question,
again,
and I'll have questions after.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry, Fred, I was raising my hand. I didn't understand.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
So these parks will have clients, right? And sounds like at the school location, you were thinking of it as kind of a school, right? So does the school get a certain percentage of the gardens, or how that would work out? The other thing in that location is there's a lot of informal public gathering in that part of the park. I've witnessed quite often. So how do we mitigate the impacts that might have on those groups? How are we going to, like, you know, is that a private discussion, or are you looking to the town to basically have those kind of stakeholder engagements with the users currently in the park? Because I've just seen enough people there to know that they'll be impacted and want to have their voice be heard. So, you know, if you can answer that now, if not, you can say we don't know yet, but it's just a presentation preliminary, but that's something I anticipate might be an issue at the Cove. But there you have a bathroom. At the other location, you know, as we've known from the Parks and Rec planning, that sometimes, you know, how would you solve the bathroom problem at the other location? And in that one, just to clarify, you imagine that the client there would be primarily apartment users. The only reason I'm asking who you see wanting to use these, right, is because of the adjacency on I think East Corte Madera doesn't get as much, feels like it's neglected some, but those are primarily single family homes that have their own plots within their own borders. And so it's just, you know, if the school aspect of that, if you could just kind of address that a little bit further, if you think like,
Thank you. So there were a number of questions in there, but in response to who would use the gardens.
Yeah.
In the case of the Cove site, I'm not sure what the correct language is, but my understanding is that there is a subsidized housing, if that's the right term, that's near the DMV, no, CHP, by the CHP. And so I think that's still true. I'm not sure if it is. So I could envision that that's not so far of a distance that those individuals would be able to use that. I think what we would draw up is, according to some of these guidelines that come from cooperative extension, how we determine who's eligible to apply and the process for selection. Would it be random? We pull names out of a hat and those things that we would determine, but we try to keep it as equitable process as possible. And homeowners that do live nearby, it might be possible that perhaps it's a senior person who has a yard but is not using it for food production, but might want to walk over and have just one bed, have some support, have it be accessible to them since they're in a wheelchair. So I think we take that probably on a case by case basis, and it would be put into our charter or operation.
So just to be clear, you're talking about Aegis, the elderly care.
No,
facility?
it's
I
an
think she's talking about
actual.
San Clemente Place on
Thank
San
you.
Clemente, next to the CHP.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that seemed to be a logical conclusion. And then the other site, which has been considered, we're looking at, as Tanya said, more of a phased in approach and hopefully go with the Cove. And as we build experience there, then maybe develop the other site or another site that we identify. But that, just to use that one as an exemplar, it is right across from, I don't know if those are those condos or apartments there at the old, where the old Wind Cup was. Are they apartments or are they condos?
Those are apartments.
The other thing
Apartments.
is, in future planning, there's many more that might be potential. in that area
Absolutely.
That could be well serviced.
Yeah, I saw the
I know
scary
quite a lot
signs.
of gardeners in those areas that wish they had more plots to.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay. There was a multi-part question in there. Was there anything else we haven't touched on?
So it was the client, and then the bathrooms, like just, how the smaller bathroom would be handled at the other location, or if we wouldn't provide it. If you've seen other examples, if not, in future presentations, I think it just would be
Okay.
a consideration to address.
And so the market nearby has offered,
Andy's Market, the manager. Yeah, want the public to come in here.
Sure.
Somebody's overburdened and they're thinking, well, yeah, they can come in.
Just to make a note is that if you're not at the mic.
You're right.
That's something that I personally would have to research and look and see how other communities have dealt with that issue. Because people gotta go, they gotta go.
And then, so I also have a question for staff. In that other location previously, when I was on the planning commission, I have seen that site addressed for future housing needs and other things. So I was just curious, I think it's owned by the town, but I don't know what its current status is and what impacts something like this might have. Because are you aware offhand what that might be?
Yeah, certainly we previously, we didn't identify it as a suitable housing site for the housing element this time around. And so certainly could be repurposed for something else potentially. But it's obviously a long, narrow strip. So it's not something that the zoning still has some housing related uses there, but that's kind of irrelevant as long as we're not proposing to use it for housing.
Is it a change of use in a public park to go to food production type, or like there's no change in its
That's a good question.
impacts?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's compatible when you look at them and elsewhere, they're compatible with park uses. I haven't looked technically at what our language says in our municipal code.
Fair, yeah, I was just thinking, is there setbacks to the neighbors since that was brought up and stuff, but this is all future. Part of it is this is a great preliminary presentation, and I don't want to dig too far in because it's not fair to the projects, so.
Okay, are there any other questions from council members?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Just two quick questions. I think most of my questions have been asked, so thank you, council members and Karen. One, I was just, so you mentioned that the beds would be rented out. I was just curious, so like who is it a fee, and who like collects that money?
So as I said, I didn't have time to show the full layout, but there's multiple exemplars about how gardens are managed in this UC cooperative extension information. And the fee would be determined by whatever governing body decides, once a garden gets built, we decide what's a reasonable fee. Some of that would have to be adjustable because we will have to be paying for the water. So we need to get a feel for what is our water costs, what are they going to be? So that one can be determined, and I think it has to be worked out by a committee of some sort.
So the money goes to some community group that's running the garden.
Yes, again, that part also needs to be fleshed out. Right now, we're just looking at concept and can we do it and is there interest?
Great.
And what was the other part to that, Eli, then?
My other question, I was just curious, do we have any sense of whether there would be an ask for like recurring town maintenance?
That's a good question. Probably, maybe.
Because that'll just be, and it's maybe not a question for right now, but it'll be a very important thing to
Absolutely
figure out.
Just if I could say, just the Larkspur model is that they use Public Works to support the gardens, but only for like a fence falls down and they need to repair it. It's not like a regular maintenance. They're there to kind of troubleshoot and help out.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how much time it actually takes, but you can call Jay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You guys have clearly put a lot of thought into this.
I had one more answer to Mr. Lee's question. Composting toilet? I mean, maybe the town would let us do a little exemplar composting toilet thing if, it's within code, but just a thought.
I'll think about it, but it's not my decision.
Any other questions from council members?
Sorry, Fred, I just thought of one more, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
No, go for it.
I just wanted to raise the question of parking. Is that something that you've talked to Cove about, and what are you envisioning for the Porter Coulee site?
Porter Coulee, we haven't actually spoken to the owner there yet, but there's ample parking in the parking lot where that business park is. That's just adjacent to the Porter Coulee. And I've always seen lots of empty spaces. And then kitty corner to that is the DMV. And, anticipating, let's say maybe 20 gardeners were out there at a time on a good day. I think there's enough around that would cover for that. At the Cove site, I'm not as familiar with it. Golden Hind? On the street there, so it'd be street parking for that one.
And are you envisioning like getting permission from the office park and the DMV, or just?
Yes. Maybe not the DMV, because they never ask me stuff like, can we do this? But for sure, the guy that owns the buildings there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions, council members? No? Gone? Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and close this portion of the presentation out. And again, thanks, great job on this. I think you provided a lot of information and a lot of stuff for us to think about going forward. So with that, we're going to move to item 4, consent calendar. These items are in the normal course of business and they've been previously discussed and they can be approved on a single motion. Any member of the town council, staff, or public may request that an item be removed for further discussion. So with that in mind, is there anybody from the public, staff, or the council that wishes to have an item removed for discussion? I don't see any hands raised. Rebecca, we did get any email comments in on this?
Just checking quickly. We did not receive any emailed public comments.
Okay, with that, go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to town council, to the council for a possible motion to approve consent items 4A through 4J.
So moved.
Thanks.
Second.
Thanks. Any other further discussion? No, with that, I'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Yes.
and Mayor Casissa.
Yes. And with that, we have no public hearings tonight. We're going to go ahead and move to item number 6, which are business items. The first one is consideration and possible approval of response to the Marin County civil grand jury report regarding affordable housing. With this, I'll turn it over to Adam and Martha.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Casissa. Just going to be myself this evening giving this report. I just wanted to start the report that the Marin County Grand Jury, Civil Grand Jury wrote in June 24th, 2022. We're required to respond within 3 months. So that gives us a couple days, I think, until the 22nd of September to confirm our response and send it over to the Civil Grand Jury. Frankly, I think this was one of the more well-written grand jury reports I've seen since I've I've been here in the town of Corte Madera and reading these reports, but it laid out, I think, some really good background related to the history of collaboration on housing issues in Marin and elsewhere, and really the current need to take another look at such efforts in order to address affordable housing and workforce housing goals and needs. So ultimately, the report laid out 10 findings, which the draft, all of which the draft response that staff has prepared agree with. And then there's one recommendation. And that recommendation is titled R1. It says that no later than December 31st, 2022, the Marin County Board of Supervisors and Marin cities and town councils should jointly create a regional authority or empower an existing authority such as the Transportation Authority of Marin to coordinate affordable and workforce housing policy on a countywide basis. In response to that recommendation, staff has drafted a response that says this recommendation will not be implemented because it is not warranted or reasonable. And so it's basically the form that we drafted says we disagree wholly or partially with the finding. I'm sorry, that's the recommendation. I should mention actually with F8, finding 8, we did respond, draft a response that says we disagree wholly or partially with finding number 8. The draft response goes on with the narrative, and it notes that the town remains open to additional collaboration and or more formal arrangements in the future as appropriate, but that creating a JPA or other regional entity empowered to work on a regional housing issue is not realistic in the time frame that the grand jury really puts out there, December 31st, 2022. The response goes on to further discuss the existing collaborative efforts the town is currently undertaking and participating in, and the future collaborative efforts that we intend to explore. And that some of that is included in our draft housing element. Other potential opportunities for collaboration with our cohorts in Marin County include potential shared services or shared staffing opportunities. But we're already at a staff level collaborating, and there may be other efforts. The next housing cycle one, I would just note we may want to explore is this sub-regional effort to sort of address RENA and allocate those numbers. Sort of, there is an opportunity potentially to allocate those numbers and make those decisions locally within if there was an established sort of process and structure to allocate those. I do want to say, given the discussion in the response, and then I rereading our recommendation and our response to the recommendation of the grand jury. One, I'd like to recommend a slight change to our response and just the wording. It's basically to make it more consistent with the narrative. And so the response to R1 says this recommendation will not be implemented because it is not warranted or reasonable. I think it's more accurate based on the narrative discussion that we say this recommendation will not be implemented because it is not warranted at this time or realistic. And I think that more accurately reflects sort of the narrative discussion that follows in our response. And that, which is really about leaving the door open. Let's have future discussions about collaboration on these issues, which are, as we know, are critical and very important. And I think the grand jury report makes some good points about sort of the benefits of exploring that in the future. So with that, there is one of my staff report in front of me. The actual action we are asking you to consider is to approve the draft response and authorize essentially the staff to respond to the grand jury with the draft response in the packet before you tonight.
Thanks, Adam. Are there any questions from council members?
I have one, Fred.
Go ahead, Leila.
I just had a question about the F8 response. Because it says, what does it say? Sorry. It says large affordable housing developments require subsidies to be financially feasible. And our response is that we partially disagree. And then in our narrative, we basically say, well, we agree that large affordable housing developments require subsidies to be financially feasible, but we also think small developments require financial. So I guess I just wonder, to me, that seems like we're not actually disagreeing. We're agreeing and adding a comment or further context. So I just wonder if you've thought about that or if it's worth trying to.
Yeah, and part of our collaboration was working with the county on sort of the responses and being coordinated on that. But I understand the point. And I think frankly, what a more accurate response might be just that large affordable housing developments in Marin may require less subsidies to be financially feasible than sort of the smaller units, but happy to modify that if at all, if that's the consensus of the council. But I understand your point. It's not really the response is not really reflective in the actual. The narrative is not reflective of actually the response that we have there. I should say.
No, but I get what you're going for. You're basically saying like you're omitting like a key point of this,
Yes.
So yeah. Okay, well, I don't mean to nitpick. I just that was something that jumped out to me, so I just wanted to raise it.
It's all good. Any other questions from council members?
And I
No, with that,
And with that one small change, just to the response, R1 that I noted. So just that would be helpful to get that into the record and concurrence on that.
thanks. If there's no other questions from council members, I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. I don't see any hands raised.
I'm not seeing any hands raised and we don't have any in-person attendees at the podium currently.
Thank you.
And we did not receive any emailed public comment.
Thanks. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to council for comments. And again, we're looking for to approve the response back with the change that Adam had noted. Eli, go ahead. It looked like you had a hand up.
I was just going to say thank you, Adam and staff, and I'm happy to move adoption of this proposed response with the amendment that Adam gave verbally.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thanks. Is there any further discussion or comments?
I just wanted to also second Adam's understanding that this is probably one of the best responses to a grand jury I've seen. And I felt like it was spot on with what I've seen both locally within the town and regionally in the discussion. And it made me very happy in its current format. So I'm glad Fred gets to sign it.
Can I just add to that? I think this is incredibly well done. And you're absolutely right. We need affordable and workplace housing in Marin County. The only way to make it work is to get subsidies and grants. It just doesn't work with regular housing. We've seen that the only way to get regular housing built with affordable, we always have to lower the affordable requirement. San Rafael just did it a few months ago. They had to lower it from like 15 to 10% to get a development built. And you're also absolutely right. Trying to form a JPA, 3 months, come on, no way. Especially one this complicated. That's going to be this powerful and this effective and really needed. So I think this is a great initiative and great response. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, I think we have a motion. It was seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Aye.
and Mayor Casissa.
Yes, so with that, we'll move to 6B. This doesn't require action. It's a 2-meeting item. It's introduction of resolution to revise the department head salary schedule.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an item that is really a reflection, I think, of Todd's philosophy and one that I, while he was town manager, and one that I also intend to carry on, of being proactive about staff retention and making sure that we're periodically looking at our salary surveys, our salary schedules to ensure we're remaining competitive with our cohorts. And specifically looking at our department head position, of Director of Public Works and Sanitary District Number 2, Manager of Sanitary District Number 2. The salary for this position was slotted, I think, where it needed to be with respect to the Public Works Director position, but really didn't take into account some of the additional responsibilities that RJ and that position really is required to do as the district manager for Sanitary District 2. You know, we did, attachment 2 does have a salary survey that we conducted that is attached to your staff report. Looking around the rest of the county and even into Sonoma, there's not really a perfect comparison to this position. Most other jurisdictions will have a director of public works, and then they'll also have a separate position managing the sanitary district that's associated with that local jurisdiction. And some are larger and some are frankly smaller. You know, when we looked at that salary comparison, however, Todd and I felt that 5% increase to the salary schedule was appropriate and would place the top step of this position at around the same level as that as the Public Works Director at Mill Valley, who also has some additional responsibilities with respect to the sanitary district over there as well. And so I think simultaneously what we did was looked at that, and then we also, Todd started this process of evaluating the performance of our district manager for Sanitary District 2. And then also obviously for Public Works Director RJ's performance, got some input from the town council on that performance evaluation. And given the positive review, we're recommending that the town council introduce this resolution, which if approved and adopted would increase the salary of our Public Works Director, and then as well simultaneously would also actually after 2 council meetings would also change the salary schedule for that position moving forward by 5%.
Thanks, Adam. Are there any questions from town council? I just have one quick question. We don't have an ST2 meeting tonight, but does this have to also be approved by the sanitary district?
No, Amy's shaking her head, so I'm going with that. No, but, and I should mention, you know, we did talk about, this is really related to the additional responsibilities for associated with the managing District 2. And so the additional budget essentially associated with that 5%, which comes out to about $11,000 a year, would come from the Sanitary District 2 budget. And I've talked to Daria about that, and we can do that. So that's how we would handle that.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from council members? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. I assume we have nobody there in person, correct, Rebecca?
Actually have 2 in-person attendees,
Oh, sorry about
but
that.
they are not standing at the podium wishing to make public comment at this time.
Thank you. And I don't see any hands raised. Any email comments?
Did not receive any email to public comments.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and bring it back to council for any comments. And again, we don't need action on this tonight. It'll be introduced also at our next meeting. Bob, go ahead.
Don't we have to introduce the resolution tonight? You said no action tonight. Don't we need to introduce the resolution?
I believe typically we just get direction.
Oh, we just get direction. Okay.
Get direction from staff to bring
Okay.
it forward for consideration and possible adoption at a subsequent council meeting.
Right. It is a resolution which only requires 1 reading, but the town's policy is to do 2 reading on matters related. So it can just be introduced and adopted at the next meeting.
Okay.
So with that, sorry, with that in mind, do we have a consensus to move forward with the resolution with at our next meeting?
Absolutely.
This was actually a result of a grand jury report maybe 5 or so years ago, civic openness and negotiations, where the grand jury recommended that all matters involving salary and benefits of town employees be brought before the body on a business item at 2 consecutive meetings.
Okay. Thanks. With that, if there's no other comments, we'll go ahead and move to council reports. Adam, you're up first.
right. I have a couple of updates or reports for you. One, I just know there's been a lot of discussion, I think, at the last town council meeting and then ongoing about parklets, and just letting you guys know the plan for staff is to right now we're having the planning department work on some of the research regarding what other cities are doing with respect to parklets and some of the regulations they're sort of considering and putting in place for a more permanent basis, keeping sort of the outdoor dining as part of their community. So we're looking at that. We intend to come to the council in November. We've also explored the option of extending the urgency ordinance. So we'd likely have that up for consideration at the same time as we sort of also give sort of an update, or I'd just say sort of a report on sort of the various different options that are out there for us to consider. And so that would be a November council meeting timeline, just so you have that information at your disposal when you get pinged by potential members of our community. I did want to give a quick update of some exciting news around town hall. We should see next week, actually, some of the footings starting to be drilling for some of the footings actually taking place. The pad is being certified, so that's happening next week. So it's settling, and then they have to do some sort of soil certifications and whatnot, and then they can actually start drilling for the foundations. So that is getting underway next week. I'm very excited to see the progress there. One note on staffing, just to let you know that I was informed last week. Our building official, Chris Ragland, will be moving on. He has been offered the position and has accepted the position to be the chief building official for the city of Oakland. So a big move, and we wish him well. A big move there. Wow. But quite a challenge. I think he said he has 100 direct reports going starting in a couple of weeks. So, but we wish him well. I think fortunately, I had a meeting today, and I think fortunately we may have already found at least a temporary replacement that can at least fill in and bridge the gap while we recruit for a new hire. And that is the same person we were using before to do that same purpose about a year ago. So more to come on that, I guess. We'll just have to work on that. I'm going to work on that contract and get that sort of taken care of as soon as possible so we can have a smooth transition. But that would be likely be Thomas Ahrens, who I met with today, who is familiar with our community and I think did a great job in that role. And then lastly, just on a, next, I've warned you all, I'm actually taking my vacation next week. So I'll be out starting next week, Wednesday through October 9th. So Rebecca will be the acting town manager during that time. I'm still debating whether I'm zooming into our next council meeting, depending on what's on the agenda. I may do so, but I'll keep you posted on that.
So Rebecca will be giving the town manager's reports at our next meeting potentially.
Yes.
Thank you.
So and those are, I think, all of my reports.
Hey, Adam, one quick question. What's going on with the climate position?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have an interview panel scheduled for the end of September. And we have one person in particular who we're excited to interview. So we'll just wait and see on that.
Thanks. Any questions from council members to Adam? No, with that, okay, we'll go ahead and go for council reports now. Eli, you're up first.
Thank you. Just a few quick items. At next week's MCCMC meeting, the MCCMC Water Policy Subcommittee will be releasing their report. So that'll be helpful. I attended the League of California Cities annual conference in Long Beach last week, voted on a resolution there. We sent a resolution to a couple different league committees, but it's basically looking at local control in kind of a blanket fashion. CMSA, I can report, continues to move slowly towards looking at some sort of recycled water project. So I think that is very hopeful for Marin County's water supply. And I attended my first MCE meeting as our new rep there and voted to make Deep Green their new default option, which I think is a great common sense step. So I was happy to see that move forward. And that is all I've got.
Eli, you missed Sunday.
Oh, Sunday. Yeah. So well, do you want to take it?
No, you go ahead. Go for it.
So Fred and I volunteered with Age Friendly, and we did the annual honoration of Corte Madera's residents age 90 and up, which is my favorite day of the year. And so we had 32 honorees, and we assembled gift bags and like drove door to door and delivered them and made a lot of days. So it's really nice.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, I had a wildfire JPA meeting. We're doing a ton of work. I'll just tell you that. You've probably seen some of the stuff in the IJ, but we are moving on all kinds of fronts. And that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Leela.
Nothing to report.
Thanks, Charles.
I don't have anything to report because we've been on break. I would like to add that our past town manager used to call in from Cabo and now he's gone. So I would recommend you not call in while on vacation. Thank you.
Thanks. For me, I attended Age Friendly Corte Madera meeting and also Ross Valley Paramedic Authority meeting. I think I'm running out of juice with my voice. With that, we have the draft agenda for the next meeting, which is out there. And if there's no further business to come before the council, I don't see any, we'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting. Thanks, everybody.